Okay, I'm super excited about this training topic today. We have talked about a lot of things so far. We started out talking about the 3 things everyone needs to know about their money, which is 1, our taxes, how that affects our money. 2, the impact of losses and the ups and downs of our money. 3, fees, which we spent a whole section just on fees. Then last week we talked about the 2 things that the 2 biggest mistakes everyone makes with their money, which is 1, not having access to it when you need it, and 2, interrupting the compounding. So your compound interest, of course, works best over time. We tend to get in the habit of resetting or interrupting, I should say, that compounding. So those are the 2 things that we talked about last time. Now, today we are going to start the beginning of the 5 biggest wealth transfers. The first one, of course, is the mortgage, and that's what we're going to talk about today. We'll transfer more money in the mortgage than about anything else. The second one is your qualified plans. That will be next week. We'll talk about qualified plans like 401ks, IRAs, SEP, simples, all that kind of stuff. And then the third one that we'll talk about in a few weeks will be on taxes. And that is, of course, your biggest expense that you're ever going to have in life. And then we are going to talk about college funding and saving for your kids' college, another big transfer that a lot of people make. And then the last one, of course, we will talk about major capital purchases, which could be things that you might put on a credit card, things that you like buying a car or an investment, investing in a business, anything like that. That's another one of the major wealth transfers. So today we're going to talk about mortgages, one of my favorite topics, because definitely one of the areas that we can help people the most. And I always start out asking every one of my clients, if you had enough money to pay cash for a house, would you do it? What do you think everyone says? Yes. Okay. I quickly ask, does Donald Trump use his own cash to pay for real estate, his real estate?
Most certainly not.
And most people very quickly say no, right? So if we would actually pay cash, but Donald Trump wouldn't, what is the difference? And which one is right? And why do we think differently? Well, I also think it's interesting because there's a book called How Rich People Think, and it goes through and it compares this guy, Siebel, I think it was, the author. He spent years going around and interviewing millionaires and asked them all sorts of questions about different topics, and he compared the difference between how wealthy people think with how the average person thinks. And one of the things that you might hear a lot of wealthy people talk about is OPM, which is other people's money. Okay? So a lot of wealthy people understand the advantages of using other people's money. But you and I call it debt. So it's interesting, in my opinion. I think that's fascinating because everyone can read a book and they can learn about the wealthy people talking about other people's money, and other people's money, and it makes sense to them. They think, yeah, okay, that makes sense. I would like to use somebody else's money instead of my own money. That makes sense. They logically get it. But then if you ask them if they would pay cash for a house, they say yes. So it's interesting that we might understand that wealthy people use other people's money, but when it comes to us being able to use other people's money, sometimes we don't. We like to use our own money. And so the mortgage is definitely one of those scenarios. And we're going to start off with a quiz. Now, for those of you who have been around a while, you may know some of the answers to these quizzes. But let's go through and see what 90% of the people that we meet with or that we talk to about mortgages are going to say to these questions. A large down payment will save you more money over time than a small down payment. True or false? What would the general public say about this? True? Okay. How about a 15-year mortgage will save you more money over time than a 30-year mortgage? True. Okay. How about making extra principal payments saves you money? You want to pay it off quicker, right? Okay, cut down on the interest, pay more towards the principal. All right, how about the interest rate is the main factor in determining the cost of the mortgage. Lower the interest rate, less interest that you're going to pay, right? Okay, true. The average person definitely would say true to that. You are more secure having your house paid off than financed 100%. Who would agree? That'd be nice, having the house paid off? Sure. Okay, so 100 people surveyed, 99 out of 100 would answer true to all of these questions. Now, what if everything you knew about mortgages turned out not to be true? When would you want to know? 16 years ago. Good answer. All right. As soon as possible. Right? Okay. Now, you may be surprised to find out that every one of these questions are false. Okay? Now, when it comes to mortgages, there's a lot of different mortgages. And it can be very confusing because there are so many different mortgages to choose from. If the mortgage companies made the same amount of money on each of them, wouldn't they just get rid of them all and have one? Right? Might logically make sense. But is it possible that they make more money on some than others? Now, I believe that money or mortgages or anything else is like a game of tic-tac-toe. When you first played it as a kid, you lost every time because you didn't know what the strategy was until somebody taught you. You always need to be looking for where they're going to go next. And they taught you the strategy, and then you started to learn how to win. Well, the thing with money and mortgages is usually when we're sitting down, meeting with someone, the person on the other side of the desk usually knows more than we do. And so since they know the strategy and we don't, we tend to lose every time. So our goal with everything that we do here is to teach you how to play the game, not just play the game for you. Then you become a lot more educated and a lot more dangerous in a good way. All right. Now, this box represents everything that you know today, in particular about mortgages. Now, every once in a while, there's some information that comes along that's outside of your box of knowledge. So we can do one of two things. We can completely ignore it, we can fight it, we can argue it, or we can get a bigger box, okay? So today, we are definitely going to be getting a bigger box, especially as it pertains to mortgages. So in the very beginning, when we first meet with people, we always talk about how our philosophy is that we can do more good for someone to help them avoid the losses or the losers in life than we can help them then pick a winner. So we don't talk a lot about the actual specific, golf club, if you will. We talk more about the golf swing because it's not as important to get a good rate of return on a product as it is to understand how to use it. And so for us, it's a lot more about technique. And so we talk about these transfers or these wealth transfers, and the concept is opportunity cost. If we're transferring away a lot of money unnecessarily and a lot of times unknowingly, then it's not just costing us that extra money, it's costing us what that money could have earned us over a long period of time. So there's a lot of wealth transfers. There's a lot of ways that we pay for insurance that we can maybe fine-tune and tweak and save a lot of money over time. There's a lot of ways that we can buy a car differently, that we could manage credit cards differently. Now, today, of course, since we're talking about mortgages, let's just look at that one. Could we potentially transfer away some money as it pertains to a mortgage? Now, there's a ton of money going through our hands. You've heard all sorts of strategies, paying your mortgage every other week, because that cuts down on it. There's so many strategies, which is true, which is actually truly going to save you the most money. Well, a lot of times, we actually buy 3 different mortgages, okay, or 3 different homes when we buy a house. We go and we buy a house and we think the house is ours and we bought just one house. In reality, we bought the bank a house as well because we're going to be paying enough interest over time to allow them to go buy, another house themselves with the interest. Now, we always rush to pay off the house because we don't want to have any debt. Okay, so we rush to pay off the house, and then we give up our biggest tax deduction. And so we start to construct a house for the government, and we start to build them a house with all those extra tax dollars that we're paying them. Biggest argument that my mom and dad have had for years. My dad retired at 57. He's an accountant, and he had all of his money invested in real estate, and he's now retired with a nice little dividend check, and he has a mortgage on his house. And my mom cannot for the life of her figure out how they can be in debt, okay, and be in retirement. You can't retire with debt. You can't retire with still having a mortgage. But guess who keeps refinancing and refinancing because he refuses to get rid of his biggest what? Tax write-off. Okay. Now, his investments, let's just say they're earning double-digit returns. Okay. Could he liquidate some of that money and pay off the mortgage? Sure. But should he? If his money over here is growing in double digits and over here the mortgage is only costing him 4% plus the tax deduction, maybe even less than that, why would he not use other people's money? And that's kind of the mindset, and that's the idea of what we need to think about. So by making the wrong decisions, we could be transferring away a lot of extra money in taxes alone, which could be one of the reasons, why we consider this to be a wealth transfer. Okay. Now, if we have a $250,000 mortgage, and let's say that mortgage is costing us 4.5%, on a 30-year mortgage, we're first of all paying, of course, the $250,000 for the house. Okay. Then we are going to finance that at 4.5%, which means that we just built the mortgage company a house as well. Okay. And the interest that we paid. And then at let's just say a 6% return, all of that money that we paid on the house and all that money that we paid on interest was an opportunity cost of $1.2 million, meaning that if we wouldn't have purchased the house and if we wouldn't have paid all that interest and we would have invested that over 30 years, that would have been worth $1.2 million. Now, we need to have a roof over our heads, so there's nothing wrong with this wealth transfer or this opportunity cost, not a wealth transfer, but this lost opportunity cost, because we need to have a mortgage. So the point of this is not to say that we shouldn't have a mortgage. The point of this is to say that that's a lot of money that if we maybe fine-tune it a little bit, could end up with a lot of extra money in our pocket if we're smart with how we pay for this investment here, or this asset, as we like to call it. Okay, so there are two different ways to pay for something. A lot of people, the first way is we can finance it. Now, a lot of people say, I don't finance anything, I pay cash for everything. Are they still financing it?
Yes.
Yes, we are self-financing it. In other words, we are giving up the opportunity cost on our money to self-finance it. So let's say that my money is growing at 6% and I pay cash. Did I just self-finance it at 6%? Sure. Okay. Now, a lot of times people have their money in the bank, so it's not getting a good rate of return. So they think, well, heck, my money's not even making 1%, so I'm not going to finance it at 4%. I'm going to pay cash. So first of all, you've got to learn how to make a better return on your money. And we can show people how to get a good, safe, 5, 6, 7, 8% return without any losses. And so if you can shift, where your money's at and get in a position where you're making 6% on your money now in a safe, conservative way, it changes everything. Because a safe 6% on your money, if somebody else will borrow your money at 4%, now all of a sudden it makes more sense. And that's why somebody like Donald Trump is always using other people's money, or like my dad is using the bank's money, because his money is earning more than the interest that he's paying. So a lot of what we can teach people is how to get a good return on your investments or on your money, so that now you want to use other people's money instead of your own money, which of course is a big piece of this. Now, there are a lot of reasons why we don't want to have a mortgage, but there are 3 reasons that we might want to have a mortgage. Number 1, you don't have enough money to pay cash. Okay, it's a pretty good reason to have a mortgage. You can't afford to pay cash. So if you can't afford to pay cash, you don't have enough money, well, then that's a pretty logical reason. Now, the second thing, 100 people surveyed, second thing that people say they want a mortgage for is, we already talked about it, the tax deductions. Okay? The tax deductions could be a very significant impact on your reason for getting a mortgage. And of course, the third one is what I was just mentioning a second ago, the potential spread that you could be making on your money versus the amount of money that they're charging you on the mortgage, right? So, is inflation a factor on your mortgage payment? Let's say that we have a $1,200 mortgage payment right now, okay, $1,200 a month. What is happening what is happening over time to that $1,200 payment? Because see, a 30-year mortgage at $1,200 will be $1,200 the entire time, right? It doesn't go up like rent. I mean, you might be able to charge rent, that inflates. So maybe if you have a rental, maybe the rental cost is going to go up with inflation. But does your 30-year mortgage change? Are you still paying $1,200 30 years from now? Okay, so in 30 years from now, how much does that $1,200 feel? How much does it feel like out of your budget? A little less than 500. So what money is worth the most value to you? Your money now, the $1,200 now that's coming out of your budget, or the $400, almost $500 in 30 years from now? Which one hurts the most? Right now. Right? I mean, $1,200 right now feels like $1,200. In 30 years from now, it's only going to feel like $500. So if you could pay your mortgage now or wait until 30 years from now to pay it, which one would you do? Wait, because then it's going to feel like $500, right? So why are we making extra principal payments with our good money that's worth, the $1,200 today? Why are we putting extra money towards our payment now when it's hurting us the most because it's worth the most now instead of later? So in other words, a nice long 30-plus year mortgage, or even refinancing as you go, it feels like less and less over time, and it hurts it takes less out of the budget as you go over time, because hopefully your income increases over time, but your mortgage will still stay the same. So something to consider. Now, opportunity cost is something to consider as we're making a down payment. One of the questions, the first question, was a large down payment saves you more time over money than a small down payment. And we all said true, right? That the largest the down payment, the better. But here's the problem. If we just look at the mortgage, that would be true. Because if we just look at the mortgage, at the interest that we're saving on just the mortgage, that would be true. But what's the missing piece? Opportunity cost.
Or what? Back to what you said. Paying with good money today on what could be worth less.
Exactly. So let's look at what that would be worth. That's what we have to calculate with any purchase. So a down payment on a house is no different than buying a boat. It's taking our money and putting it towards something. So we have to consider what the opportunity cost is on that purchase. In other words, if a large down payment would save you more money than a small down payment, then it stands to reason that the largest down payment would save you the most money, right? Would that not make sense? So if a large down payment would save you money, then the larger the down payment, it would save you the most money. So the largest down payment is paying cash. That's the largest down payment, is just paying cash. Now you're saving all sorts of interest. Okay? You didn't have to pay any interest. So you saved the most money by paying cash, the largest down payment possible. But if you could get a 6% return safely and conservatively on that $300,000, then we have to decide, should I take that $300,000 or the $20,000 that I'm using as a down payment? Should I take that amount of money for the down payment and put it over here on my house? Or should I put it over here in my investment at 6%? And the way we figure that out is over a 30-year period of time, that $300,000 house would have to appreciate to be worth $1.2 million in 30 years from now to be smarter than putting the smallest down payment possible and putting all that extra money over here at 6%. Does that make sense?
So the difference would be if you could get a loan at 4.5%, but your money could earn 6%, then really over 30 years you're going to earn compound interest of 1.5%.
That's exactly right. So we have to basically look at where our money is going, because we always have a choice. Our money can go on the left or our money can go on the right. So we can put our money towards the house or we can put it towards an investment that we maintain and control. Okay? So we just have to decide which one is smarter. This one on the left is costing me 4.5, but this one on the right is making me 6. So I just have to decide, is a bigger down payment going to do me, is it going to make more sense over here on the left or is it going to make more sense over here on the right? That's what you have to decide. Now, there's a lot of other factors to think of too. Accessibility. If I put all that money over here on the left in the house, how much is it earning me? Not earning me anything. It's in the house.
Matter of fact, it could lose.
Yeah, you never know. Well, the appreciation of that house is going to happen no matter what. It doesn't matter how much money I put into it. It's going to appreciate, right? Real estate appreciates, period. Real estate goes up every year, right? Let's say the average is 3 or 4%. If real estate goes up 3 or 4%, is my house that's paid off going to grow at 3 or 4% the same as my house that's mortgaged? They both grow. They both inflate. They both appreciate. Okay, so I have to decide, do I want to give up my down payment money and give up access to it and give up control of it and give up the opportunity cost that it could have earned if I stuck it over here on the right? That's what I have to decide. So to calculate that, then I have to look at the amount of opportunity cost that I could make on that money if I were to invest it at 6%. And in this particular case, 1.5 million is how much that house would have to appreciate to be a smart place to put that money. Okay. Okay, so is a house a good place to park your money? Okay, I'm going to pick on Jerry. Yours was a good case. Jerry, how much is your house currently worth?
About 400.
400? And how much did you pay for it?
227.
Did you get a good deal on it?
Thought I did.
All right. How much have you paid in improvements, expenses, property taxes, all that kind of stuff? Would you guess?
Total, 100.
Did you finish the basement or anything?
The basement.
Okay. So 100,000?
100,000 easy.
Okay, easy. And how many years ago did you get it?
16 years ago.
Okay. All right. So that was a 1.27% investment return.
Woohoo! Yeah, I'm excited.
Oh, you're excited? All right. Okay. So is your house an asset? Kinda, at 1.2%, 1.2%, I mean, a little growth, right? Not bad. It gives you a roof over your head, right? But would it give you a roof over your head whether it was paid off or whether you had it mortgaged? It's still going to give you a roof over your head, right? So it still serves the purpose. But is the house itself a great investment?
Obviously not.
Okay.
And yet everybody, that's what everybody thinks.
Yeah. Last night I had an appointment. I said, how are you guys doing? We're doing great. We have lots of equity in our house, and we have, some money in our 401k. I said, okay, if you lose your job and you can't make that mortgage payment, who gets that equity? And it was silent, and they're like, well, I guess the next person that buys the house, because who actually owns the equity?
The bank does.
The bank owns the equity. Until the last payment is made and there's no longer a mortgage, then you own it free and clear. Then nobody can take it from you, right? Okay, so we'll come back to that in a minute. But my point is, I mentioned it already and I won't kind of pull up the numbers, but does your house appreciate no matter what? Yes. So it doesn't matter how much money you have financed or how much money you have into the house, or how much you've mortgaged it, or how much you've got in equity. No matter what, the house will appreciate. That's just real estate. Real estate appreciates. Okay? Yeah. Like Brad said, then the government owns the equity, or whoever it is, that ends up with that money. Okay, so let's take a look at this a little bit closer. Let's look at the $227,000, for example, that you paid for the house, and let's look at a 6% return. Okay, and let's look at a 4.5% loan rate. Over a 30-year period of time, the sum of principal and interest would be $414,000. Okay, the opportunity cost of that mortgage payment and that interest, because if you would have not had to make that mortgage payment, but you could have been investing that, it would have been 1.1 million. Okay, but instead of taking that 227,000, so that 227,000 cost you, if you factor in, which nobody does this either. Everybody always just looks at principal and interest. Their mortgage, they're looking at the ledger and they're saying, man, I'm paying all this interest. There's videos on YouTube to talk about, out of your mortgage payment, this little piece is going towards the principal, the rest is going towards interest until over this time. And all of that 30 years, I'm paying $635,000 for a $227,000 house. Not true. Because if you could have invested that money, then you lost the opportunity cost of that. So you got to look at the principal and interest and the opportunity cost, and the principal and the interest. Now you're looking at a total of 1.1 million. Does that make sense? So to finance the house, it cost you, 1.1 million, but if you would have used that money to invest it, it could have grown at 1.3 million. Now here's the best part. Is it really costing you 4.5% if you're in a 30% tax bracket? It's more like 3.1. Which is another calculation that a lot of people don't make, because they're thinking, my mortgage is costing me 4.5, and my investment is earning me 6, so I've got a 1.5% spread. Not exactly, because the 4.5% is giving me a tax deduction. So in reality, my opportunity cost is really only $979,000. So now we're talking about a $300,000 plus almost $400,000 difference between those two. Is that a wealth transfer? I mean, is that transferring away money unnecessarily and unknowingly, and you don't even know about this? I mean, this is what happens when it comes to money, and why we believe in a financial education so much is because people will actually waste as much money in their lifetime as they'll ever accumulate in a retirement account. They will transfer away more money just financing their cars than they'll ever accumulate in retirement. So if we can be more efficient with all of these, purchases and all of these expenses and all this money going through our hands, it can be a significant impact. Okay, so we've talked about a number of things. So far we've gone through that quiz kind of step by step. Now, the next one is a 15-year mortgage will save us more money over time than a 30-year mortgage, and everyone would say yes. Now, true. Now, let's look at this. The number one reason is because of the interest that they think that they will save. The perception is a shorter loan duration reduces the cost of loan. If that were true, the shortest loan duration would reduce the cost the most, and the shortest loan duration is cash. And we've already talked about that. Okay? So that is the logic. Now, up top, now this is the idea. $227,000 house. If you could afford a 15-year mortgage, then you would pay $1,700 a month, with the idea that you would then, once it was paid off, then what would you do with all that money?
Start investing.
Then you would start investing. So that's the idea. I'd get a short loan. I want a short loan to pay off my house. Then when my house is paid off and I'm out of debt, then I'm going to take all that money and I'm going to invest it for 15 years. So if I do that and I take $1,700 for 15 years, then $1,700 into an investment for 15 years, that's a total of 30. Okay. Or I take $1,100. I take $1,100 for 30 years and $586 on the side for 30 years. Which one's going to win?
Because I know you, it's going to be the 30-year mortgage.
If my 15-year mortgage is a 4.5% return, my 30-year mortgage is a 4.5% interest, not return, sorry. 15-year mortgage is a 4.5% interest. My 30-year mortgage is a 4.5% interest, and my side account at that 586 is earning 4.5 in interest. If all of those are the same at 4.5, the numbers are equal. Fascinating. Now that's a head scratcher there. Okay? Because of the time value of money. For $586,000 or $586 a month for 30 years at 4.5% versus $1,736 for 15 years ends up being the same. Head scratcher, isn't it? Now, if we could get a better rate of return on my side account than what I'm paying on my mortgage, and if I get a tax deduction on my mortgage to where I'm only paying 4, okay, now, hold on. Now we're talking $100,000 difference between the two. Another wealth transfer, another $100,000 that just disappeared because of the wrong strategy. That's all it is, right?
So just to retract.
Yeah.
You said with the tax bracket you're in, your loan was really only costing you 4% because of your tax write-offs. And what you could have done with that money had you been earning 6%.
Yes. So to repeat what he said, if we're getting a 4% kind of effective, rate on our mortgage because we get a deduction on our taxes, right? So if our effective rate, and that's not the exact number, I'd have to go back to the last screen to get the exact number, but let's just say, it was 4% effectively after my tax break, and I were getting 6% on my little $595 every month for 30 years, then the spread becomes a lot different, a lot bigger, okay? And that's something that a lot of people are rushing. You know why why a bank does a 15-year mortgage? Let's look at this next, because a lot of people are going to say, well, your 40 or your 15-year mortgage and your 30-year mortgage usually are a different interest rate. You're going to get a little better interest rate on the 15-year mortgage. So let's go ahead and talk about that. Let's say that my 30 year is 4.5, and let's say that it's usually a point difference. So let's say that my 15 year is 3.5. And let's keep my side account at 6%. So a lot of people say, hey, I'm going with a 15-year mortgage because of the interest that I'm going to save, because I'm going to get a 3.5% instead of a 4.5%. You know what that's called? That's called bait. You fish? You like fish? Right? That's called bait. Right? You say, I'm going to give you an extra 1% cheaper mortgage for you to give me an extra $1,000 a month, because I can take that $1,000 a month and give it to this fool at 18% on the credit card. Right? I'll give you a 1% break for an extra $1,000 a month all day long. I'm gonna net 17% over here on this fool. Right? That's bait. Okay? The other problem is if you've got a steep mortgage payment and you're in between jobs and you can't afford to make that steep mortgage payment, that hurts. Met with a gal the other day, getting behind on her mortgage, living paycheck to paycheck. She's a widow, young, and a single mom, and living paycheck to paycheck, and the majority of her check is going towards her mortgage. But she's strapped, she's getting behind, she's getting into debt, kind of getting behind because she can't make her bills, she can't make her payments, and she wanted to invest, but she had no money to invest. I went in and looked at her situation, looked at the details. She had a 15-year mortgage. 15-year mortgage that she was paying like $1,200 a month for. That was strapping her to the point where she had ridiculous amounts, over 200 grand in equity in that house, but she was 2 months behind on her mortgage payment. So what can happen?
You refinance.
If you could refinance, but if you're getting behind on your mortgage payment, and you're losing your credit, and you're losing your, your ability to refinance, what could happen? Worst case scenario. She could lose her house. What would happen to that $200,000 of equity? That hurts, right? We could have refinanced, paid off all of her high interest debt, and brought her mortgage payment down to $300 a month for 30 years. You know what $300 a month will feel like in 30 years from now? Peanuts, right? We could have freed up an extra $1,000 plus, almost $1,300 a month for her to save to get into a little cushion where she feels more comfortable. It's a no-brainer. That's a no-brainer all day long. Okay, so let's look at this. Your side account is 6%. Your 15-year is 3.5. Your 30-year is 4.5. Okay, so what rate of return is required in that side account to still be able to pay the house off in 15 years? Meaning, I build up all that little extra money over here on the side for 15 years, then I write the check. So my house is still paid off, right, in 15 years. My house is still paid off in 15 years. All I need, instead of 6%, all I need is 4.7 in my side account. And if I built up if my side account got 4.7 over here in 15 years, I could write that check. Okay, and my house would be paid off in the same amount of time. So with a 30-year mortgage, I could still have enough money to pay off my house in 15 years if my side account got 4.7. And my mortgage payment is a little less. So if I were in between jobs and couldn't make that payment, that side account would sure come in handy, wouldn't it? Because I would have access to that money, wouldn't I? Would I have to requalify? No. Or would I have to have a credit check to qualify? No. If that money was shoved in my freezer, I would have access to that money. Okay? Now, let's just say, however, that I did get a 6% return on that side account. Then I could actually pay my house off in 14 years, 4 months. So I can pay my house off faster with a 30-year mortgage as long as I'm getting a better return in my side account. Does that make sense? I mean, what if I could get, 6 I think is pretty conservative with what we can show people. So what if I could get a 7%? The better I can get on my side account, the faster I can pay off that house. Okay? If I wanted to. Let me ask you this though. If I were earning 7% over here in the side account and I could write that check to pay off the house that was costing me 4, would I do it? No. It'd be crazy.
6 months ago, yeah.
6 months ago you would have.
No.
But why would you? That'd be crazy, right? That's exactly right. Why lose the control? Okay, now remember in the very beginning I talked about how you're going to build 3 homes. You're going to get you a home. You're going to start the construction on the mortgage's home right away, on the bank's home. You're going to give them a home, and then you're going to rush to pay off that mortgage with a 15-year mortgage, and you're going to start the construction on the IRS home, right? Okay, so that's the American way. That is the American way, right? So in a 15-year window, a 30-year mortgage is going to save me $39,000 in taxes. That's real money. That is real money. Okay? $39,000 in tax savings on a 30-year mortgage in a 15-year window versus that 15, because remember the 15, and you're going to save all this interest. That means you don't get to write off as much on taxes. So you're only going to get a $19,000 tax savings in that 15 years. Now your house is paid off, so you are done with your tax savings. But on a 30-year, I'm not done. That is $30,000 in difference between the two, just in tax savings
Over 30 years.
over 30 years. And it's not just $30,000, it's what that $30,000 could have earned you.
It's closer to 40.
Had 40,000. 40,000. And it's not just, remember, opportunity cost, right? All that money that I'm paying in taxes, if I could have saved it and invested it, then what could that have been worth?
Well, that, whatever the compound interest is over the number of years.
That's exactly right. Okay, so as you can see, when it comes to tax savings, a 30-year gives you a lot more tax savings. Okay, so a large down payment will save you more money over time than a small down payment. Not true, because if we could get a better return on that down payment somewhere else, then that would be the best scenario. A 15-year mortgage will save you more money over time than a 30-year mortgage? Not the case, is it? Because we could invest the difference somewhere else, and we could keep our payment low. So if we lost our job or if we came into a tough situation, right, then we could, one of my clients had a 10-year mortgage, trying to pay it off as fast as he could so he could retire. And then he got laid off. That 10-year mortgage, that's a steep payment that is still coming due every month. Okay. Luckily he got another job and it was a happy ending. But is that tight? Is that stress? That's stress, right? Okay, making extra principal payments saves you money. No, crap, your money's worth the most now, right? Wait until later. If you could postpone your payments until later, we would. Not pay them now, right? Don Blanton does a lot of training and created this and created all this. He says his dad always taught him you never hurry to a whooping. Okay, so you don't ever want to get in a hurry to lose money. The interest rate is the main factor. Actually, the interest rate on your side account is the main factor, right? The more money we can make on our side account is overall determining, the cost of our mortgage. And you are more secure having your house paid off than financed 100%. This is a tough one, right? A lot of people struggle with this one because I can talk about numbers all day long and mathematically I can prove this all day long, but there's always that piece inside everyone that wants to have their house paid off, okay? So let's take a look at this a little bit closer. Now, we talked earlier, there are many reasons not to have a mortgage, but there are 3 emotional reasons to consider one. Number 1, what if you became disabled and you could no longer make that payment? Could you call up the mortgage company and say, I'm disabled, I can no longer work, could I get that $200,000 of equity out of my house so that I could live on for a while? You don't have any way to work. They're not going to give you a loan. A loan of your own equity, right? I mean, they're not going to let you have access to that. Number 2, you lose your job, like we talked about. If you lose your job, that's not a good time to go and try to re-qualify for any mortgage. It's kind of hard to prove income when you don't have a job. And when you don't have a job and you don't have income and you can't get a loan, then it's hard to refinance and get to that equity that you have in there. Okay? And then the last one is the uncertainty of the world. Is it possible for the value of your home to drop 50%? And what if that's the time that you needed to sell and move because you got a new job across the country? How many people in 2008 wanted to sell because of whatever the situation was, and they couldn't sell because their home was worth less than what they owed on it? So is it possible for even a house like a stock to lose 50% in value? So what if you lost 50% in value? Your 200,000 in equity turns into 100,000 in equity. It turns into half, right? If you're losing half the value, or if you owe 100,000 and your home's only worth 50,000 now because of the drop in the market, you have no equity. Okay, so there's a possibility that because of the uncertainty of the economy, in a scenario like in 2008, your home could drop below what you owe, which means your equity is gone. So if you have your equity in your right pocket instead of in the mortgage's pocket, and the mortgage drops or the home value drops in value, did your right pocket drop in value? No. So I would argue that you are more secure and you are more safe having the money to pay off your house, but having it in an account that you control, that you own, that you have access to anytime you want. Okay? Because if you have the money that you could write that check and pay off your house, then technically your house is paid off. But you're just leveraging other people's money for less than what you're earning on your money. Now we're talking leverage. We're not talking debt. We're talking your net worth. Your net worth is even. You owe 300,000 over here, but you have 300,000 over here. Your net worth is zero. You're even, right? You're not in debt. You're not below the line. Okay? Does Donald Trump have loans outstanding on some of those real estate deals out there? Does he look at that as debt? That's leverage. That's leverage. He's using other people's money. And that's the key. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Any questions? Okay.
Can the same principle apply for purchasing cars? I guess you could slide that.
Okay, does the same principle apply with purchasing cars? In fact, what I want to emphasize is that when I meet with clients and when I go through topics like this, they totally get it, they totally understand it, and they totally apply it to the mortgage.
Mm-hmm.
But then they don't apply it to the car, they don't apply it to their kids' college. If you have enough money to pay for your kids' college, but that money was growing at 6%, and the loan for the college with student loans was only 3%,
yeah,
and you didn't even have to pay that back until the kid graduated 5 years later, then your money could compound for 5 years while they used other people's money. See, this principle that we talked about today is not a mortgage principle, it's a money principle. It's a financial principle. If you have money in your account growing at 6% and somebody else will borrow you their money at 4.5% to go on a vacation, whose money are you going to use? Theirs. Every time. This principle is a money principle. This isn't a mortgage principle, it's a money principle. And it applies to everything. And that's why we need to start, thinking about how we use money differently. And the mortgages is one. Next week we'll talk about qualified plans, and we'll continue to kind of talk about, some of these wealth transfers. We'll get into college savings like I talked about. We'll get into taxes. I mean, here's an example of taxes that we just talked about today with the 15-year versus the 30-year. Is that real tax savings? It's real tax savings. So there's a lot of these things that we will drill into in more detail. But yes, the principles apply across the board. It's called leverage. That's all it's called. Okay. Now, you can obviously talk to one of us to be able to determine exactly how to get those 6% returns in a safe, secure way and all that kind of stuff, and how to get access to that money tax-free, how to use that money as collateral and allow it to keep growing. Those are all those strategies we kind of talked about last week, is using your money as collateral and some of that stuff. So there are other elements to this piece, and there are solutions that we can help people with. But at the end of the day, hopefully this helps you understand more about mortgages. Sound good? Okay, any questions online for all of our online friends before we close up? I do not see any questions. I've had some texting, going on here. It looks like Doug may have a question. Doug, do you have a question? I don't know if that, we need the recording. Yes, we will definitely post this, and people will have access to this for sure. So thanks again, everyone. Goodbye online, everyone watching this online. And thanks again. You guys have a great day.
Great job, Lance.
Yeah, that's awesome.